In this tutorial, we're going to continue on with the element of form, and we're taking these shapes and we're going to shade them in a way where it's going to make it look 3D. I have an example, a student example that's already done for you. So when you look at this, notice how they have similarities among them. These darker edges are called the shadow edge. And then it gets lighter again in these locations because that's called the reflected light. And then we have our light side where the light is shining. And then we have at the bottom our cast shadow. So the way that light works is, and if you're looking at the sphere, you wouldn't make the shadow edge or the darkest part right at the end because light is bouncing around the room. So the light bounces here and it shines up here and then it makes it a little bit brighter again. So always in these forms, you're going to leave a little room for it to get a little light again. So maybe not this light, but not completely as dark as your shadow edge. And so shadow edge, reflected light, shadow edge, reflected light. So they all have those same components on them. So let's look at some examples so you know what it takes to get an A. So anything you see right here is going to be A quality, nice transitions, smooth shading, using that technique, all the techniques from the how-to worksheet. They didn't smudge. If you're having a hard time getting rid of jumps in your value, just fade it out more and more. It's okay if it's darker as long as it still has the value fade to light. And here, if you have this, I probably would just make this all a value 1 or a super light value so you don't have any jumps, but overall, really good job. Now here are some examples that are not A quality. And let's go through them one by one. So if we start with this sphere, you can see how the C shape isn't too C-like. It's kind of straightening out right here. So make sure it is C-shaped, that you don't have jumps in value. So all of these areas right there, I would continue blending with. They did a better job blending here, but then there's a jump in value here and a jump in value there. I'd rather this get lighter and lighter than jump to a 0. This is probably A- quality. It is still in the A zone. I just have it in here so you can see how these rows are looking. So kind of go back through and fade those out. But that kid would be getting an A. And then there's this inconsistency happening where it's dark and then it's light and then it's dark. And then it's like a dark line and then it's erased. So be careful adding the value so you don't have to erase because then it gives you this weird quality. And just pay more attention to how the values are fading. And again, another jump, and then here are some rows that need to be faded out and a jump. So make sure that your values don't jump from one to the next. In this example, you can see at the top is more of a subtle fade, and then this is more of a jump. So this needs to be faded out. Started just going back and forth with lines, and that's what we don't want, just kind of huge lines across your page, and then fading that jump out a little bit more. Don't outline your shadow. We don't want it to look cartoony. And then working on that jump some more. And the C shape needed to be a little bit more close to the edge and then wrap around. It kind of just stops. And it needs to just continue and fade all the way around that edge. Big lines when they were shading. Too much of a jump. Huge lines when they were shading. Don't do that. You can't hide them. So let's go ahead and get started practicing our forms and our shading. We want to use those good shading habits that we learned from the How to Shade worksheet, having a stack of paper underneath your paper so it cushions your shading and it gets rid of any imperfections on your table. You also want to have a separator paper so that you don't smudge all of your projects when you're doing this. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. So the first thing we're going to start off with is our shadow edge. And we're going to go ahead and make that shadow edge a value 4. And I'm going to go ahead and do that circular technique. And I want it to be in a C shape. And that C shape is going to just kind of get lighter and lighter and just fade around the sphere. So I start again here. Normally you wouldn't shade, and this is kind of a row, but it's also our shadow edge, so we have to break that rule just a little bit. So again, another C shape. And I'm going to get it lighter and lighter as I wrap it around this edge. So a big C. It would not look like, so let me draw what it won't be. So if this was your circle, you are not drawing a shape that is like straight. That will flatten out your sphere, so this is a no. Okay, so C shape, it's parallel here, and then it kind of tapers its way to the edge. Right now I don't have it quite a value 4, so I'm going to go a little darker. Or we can have our shadow edge be a value 3. It doesn't have to get too dark, but it just has to be the darkest thing that we're shading. So let's say that it was, this is like a 3.5, let's say. I'm going to go ahead, and if this was a 3.5, I'm going to fade it out. And so as I fade it out, I'm going to press a 3.5. So I'm pressing as hard as I was pressing before. So whatever pressure you had, match that. And then I'm going to get lighter and lighter and lighter with my pressure. Notice how I can still see that edge, that jump right there. So that means that I got lighter too quickly. So I'm pressing that pressure that I had to begin with, and then I keep it, and I notice, okay, it's doing something, and then I get lighter and lighter as I go out. And again, it's kind of like we're shading in rows because I'm kind of going like this, but I'm getting lighter and lighter as I go, a little bit of like a little value scale. We are doing it in little segments that's going to help make a web around it. So I'm going to do another row, and it's going to start like here, kind of overlapping and work my way out. Kind of overlapping and work my way out. So I'm going to match that pressure. And remember, you're getting better, or you're getting used to matching pressure. And then as I go out, I get lighter with my pressure. Match the pressure. And if you can't tell if you're matching it, you can shade out a little bit until it matches. See, I was outside of the edge a little, and then I get lighter and lighter. So match that pressure and get lighter and lighter. The goal here is that you don't have any jumps in value. So that initial C shape that we made, we don't want to see it go from here to there. We want it to be a gradual fade. So I'm going to keep going until it looks nice. Match that pressure, fade it out. And then continue on to this lower half. Match that pressure. And then get lighter and lighter and lighter. Before I move on from this, I'm going to kind of take a look at it and see, does anything jump in a weird way? And then kind of give it a little bit of a finesse. So I might make this a little darker right here. And then fade it one more time because it looked a little bit weird. Make sure that your ebony pencil is sharp so that we don't have a bunch of white little grooves showing or darker bumps forming. Now what we have to do, so if we look at this example, is we have to fade it out to the right now and down. And so we're going to kind of do the same thing, but we can have a quicker fade if we want to. So I'm matching the pressure. So again, instead of working in here, because I can't see if I've matched it, I'm coming out just a little bit on this edge. And this right now is not matched. I'm not pressing hard enough. So little by little, I press a little harder. Now I'm matching it. And then I'm just going to kind of softly get lighter and lighter and lighter to the point where I'm picking my pencil up off the page. Now this is going to be hard with an ebony pencil to get it to go to a value 0. So if you can't get it to be completely value 0 right here, then you can continue and make all of this a value 1. Remember to get really light, holding the pencil farther back on the back side is going to help you get it to be lighter. So there's a little bit of a jump, so I'm going to do it one more time right there. And then I'm going to come between here and here and then shade another section. And we really don't want it to show like we are doing it in sections, and so that's the downfall on this method. So what we're going to probably have to do is go back and finesse it. Do you see how you see the rows? So I'm just going to have to make a web once it's like that and just kind of clean it up. And then this little jump, I can switch to my number 2 pencil for value 1 only if I need to. And then I lift it off the page, trying to get it as light as I possibly can over there. And then you just continue on around. So now I'll just go ahead and do this, matching that pressure. And you're going to see that row that we got a camouflage. A little bit of a jump still, so let me do it one more time. Matching that pressure. And then continue on with the bottom. So where you can, you don't want to shade in rows. But here, when it comes to doing a value fade like this, it kind of is hard if you didn't. Because you got to get your pressure lighter and lighter and lighter as you go out. So it is what it is. But by going over it several times, it kind of camouflages that pattern that I'm putting in there. So continue on down. See that? You can really see, right? So I'm going to have to do some layering. And sometimes it's easier if you take your paper and you turn it sideways, because my hand naturally goes in this direction. That's going to help me with my fade. This is pretty light right here. Once we make it to this other side, there's going to be a little bit of maybe like a value 1 or 2 creeping back in around this side. So we're taking that C shape, and then we are just putting a little bit of value on the edge and then doing a quick fade. Quick fade. And you're going to do that all the way around the sphere. A little bit of a value too. You can see how there's a lot of jumpiness. You can see my directional lines. Like you can see all of these lines kind of going this way from the way that we have to do this fade, but we'll fix all of that. You try to just do the best you can. As I work towards the middle, I lift my pencil up off the page. I'm going to get just a little darker on the shadow edge. Or not the shadow edge, the value 2 that's creeping in on the inside. So a little bit darker. And then it gets lighter as it goes to the center. If your pencil gets too dull, you can rotate it so that you're using a sharper point so that it gets into the grooves of the paper. Oops, I got a little too dark right there. So I'm gonna have to go even darker here. I don't want to erase because then it looks smudged. So if you have problems, just make everything just a little bit darker. Right, I'm gonna look at this and see how you have a row and a row. We don't want that. So that means I need to stay in one area longer and I need to weave another or blend another layer on top. It's kind of going over my work, getting really light as I go to the middle. And I'm creating that web of lines on top of each other to hide any imperfections. So you would spend time filling in any of these little gaps and holes with a very light pressure. But now I have a jump. And I'm either going to hold my ebony pencil really far away and hold my paper up in the air like that. And then that helps me get super light if I'm unable to. Or you can use a number 2 pencil. So I'm going to just try to stick with my ebony pencil as much as I can. And if I can't get to a value 0, I'm just going to make all of this the lightest value I can possibly get. And what I mean by if you can't get to a value 0, if you can't get to a value 0 without having a jump, then you got to color it all in because we don't want any jumps of value on this shape at all. So that helped me get a lot lighter. I'm going to stay in these areas until this part looks nice and blended. With my light pressure, I'm going to just kind of do a little bit of blending. And then I'm going to look at this and say, where are things jumping? And I would go back and I'd touch it up. Like this is all of a sudden has like no value at all on it. I want it to be light, but I don't want it to be that light. So look for whatever mistakes. This has a little bit of a weird jump. So kind of finesse it, go back and re-look at it from a distance and say, okay, this is not blending out enough. So if you look at this student's work, you can see how there's a big jump right here. So it's dark and then it's light. It needs to have a soft transition. And so when you look here, you see how it's softer. It just subtly fades from this to this. I have a little bit of a jump right here, if you can still see it. And then those are the parts where I'm going to just match that value again. And then blend it out. Same thing here, a little bit of a jump right here. Match that value. And then re-blend it back out. Then the next thing that you need to do is put a shadow underneath this. And what you can do is just take a little bit of a rounded edge in the front, an elongated rounded edge in the back. You don't want to draw that too dark. So I drew this with my ebony, probably not a good idea. Use your number 2 to draw that. And then it's going to go from a value 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we're going to look at a student example and see where we can see some jumps. This isn't too bad, but you can kind of see where this value ended and where that value ended. And so just going back and adding a little more value to get rid of those jumps is a good idea. All right, once you finish your sphere, you're going to label it, and this is called a sphere. And then we're going to label the parts. So this is the light side. This is the shadow edge. This farthest point is going to be your reflected light. And then this is your cast shadow. So before I'd be finished with this, I would just kind of go back, fill in some little holes, some gaps, some bumps, whatever doesn't look good, just to give it one more blended layer, fine-tuning it. But pretty much that is it for that tutorial. Now let's practice the cylinder together. Separator paper, especially over our sphere that we just did. And we're going to start again with the shadow edge. And so come in just a little ways. And we're going to do our value 4 again, just like we did on the sphere. And I'm going to continue on up into this shape. If you make it a value 5, that's fine. It's just a little harder to blend out without having jumps. So now I'm going to work section by section on down, matching my pressure. So when I match my pressure, I'm not matching it here because I can't tell. I'm matching it right on the edge. So I'm paying attention. Okay, that looks like it matches. And then I'm going lighter and lighter and lighter. And then I'll do it again. Match the pressure and get lighter and lighter. And you can see that row and that row. So right in between those rows, I'm going to do another blended layer in there. So match the pressure, get lighter and lighter. Your hand is learning how hard to press to get the value that you're trying to achieve. And I have to be cautious because I'm working in rows, which is dangerous. You only do it when you have to. So then I am going to look at, see the jumps, and I'm going to go back and finesse, adding a couple more layers on top. Targeting any areas that look a little extra light until it looks like it's a nice blend. Like that looks a little light right there. And then we do the same thing to the right. So starting on this. So right on this outside edge, match that pressure. And every time I come out farther and farther, I'm getting lighter and lighter, and I'm trying to memorize what I'm doing because I'm just going to keep repeating it all the way up. It's hard because you guys can't see it, but as I work my way out, I do this move and I hold it farther back. And so every time I'm working my way out, I'm pushing the pencil, so I'm holding the back end of it. Now we're making it back to this side. We want to have a darker value kind of come in here, maybe a value 1 or 2. So I'm going to turn this separator paper, and I'm going to add just a little bit of value on this edge, and then I'm going to do a quick fade. I just rotated my pencil to get a finer point because I noticed that it was getting a little bit grainy. And I just jumped back on the pencil, so I'm holding it towards the end because I'm getting lighter. And I just jumped back on my pencil, so I'm holding it even farther back because I want to fade this out. Now when you look at this, you say, okay, is there any transition, some finessing that I need to do? I think that this is jumping quite a bit. Maybe it can be a longer transition in value, so I would go back, kind of fade this out a little farther, but you get the idea. Now we're going to put the shadow on. And we're going to go value 5. Right there. And then we're going to fade to a 4, to a 3, to a 2, to a 1. And then I got to go back and I need to fix this. So in between these two values, I need to come up with another value. In between these two values, I need it to come up with an in-between value. And I like to lightly go over it, press a little harder in areas that look too light. And then you're going to label it. Light side. Cast shadow. Cylinder. Shadow edge. Reflected light. Now you need to do the other two on your own. So what that ends up looking like for the cube is it goes value 3, 2, 1. The top is done for you, it's facing up. And your shadow edge is going to be a value 4, like we did here, but it's going to exist here and it's going to fade to a value 3. The shadow is going to be the same, where you are going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fade out to 0. And it will look something like this student's work. So value 3, 2, 1, but you don't see very obvious jumps in value. So nice subtle value fade, and a subtle value fade between your value 4 and your value 3, trying to get rid of any jumps that might be possible. And then the shadow will look a lot like this, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I'm going to have you figure out the cone on your own. So if you have values on the cylinder that look like this, how would this look if it was tapered down into a cone shape? What would your shape for your shadow edge be? For your reflected light, where would your shadow go? How would the light come and creep back in on this side? So this is going to be an independent artwork. I want to see how good you can get this by using what you've learned and applying it to this final shape.